So hopefully this one will be the last one that I have to do today. I just don't feel like I was able to render my own viewpoint well enough that someone could understand it. And like I said, I make these monologues. This is kind of like the Diary of Anne Frank. It is written for me on the off chance that someone else will find it well into the future. And so that's how I look at these YouTube videos that I upload. This is here as archaeological posterity kind of historical data. I don't expect, I'll just say what I think that these YouTube videos represent to me is I believe. I don't give a fuck if I fail and you end up calling me crazy. I don't care. Right now, I'm just going to say this. As improbable as this sounds, as outlandish as it sounds, as crazy and stupid, possibly even evil as it sounds, I am going to take over this planet. And I am going to cause a change. My impact as Michael Joss Trevathan, will have an impact upon the entire human race that is deeper, stronger, and more long-lasting than every single other human that has ever lived before me combined. Because I'm the only one that put all of it together. I'm the only human that I am aware of that was able to create, I don't use the right word here. I'm sorry, not create. Only God creates. That caused a theory, a paradigm to exist that is big enough to absorb and to encapsulate every single other possible thought or paradigm inside of itself through implication alone, obviously, because I can't explicitly state every single thought that might happen in the future. I'm not even aware of those. But by implication, my theory, my paradigm is big enough and it is integrated enough, which means it's logically valid enough, which means it's crystalline enough that it touches every single thing that is finite. It's the very first theory on planet Earth as a product of humanity that has ever touched the infinite, where it is not relegated to any particular academic category, like a biological theory or a physical theory or even a psychological theory or a philosophical theory, is limited. And I'll put it to you this way. The greatest philosophical theory that I've ever come across is nihilism. And I know that sounds really stupid, but just listen. Philosophy is correspondent, of which nihilism is a part, is correspondent with the rational, which is correspondent with equality. If there is anything that I would hope, it may not, but I hope it accurately reflects me and my movement and the things that I stand for, is equality. It's not necessarily independence. It's not necessarily interactivity. It's not necessarily the most popular. It's not necessarily the most easy to digest, but it is equally accessible to all sentient beings. Any sentient being, whether they be human, alien, or something in between, can access my theory equally. That is my ultimate justification, is the equality of access. And believe it or not, as far right as I present myself, I am a socialist. I don't believe that the common worker should be disenfranchised and enslaved by their capitalist owners by having no or having partial access to the means of production. It is a right of every worker to have direct, unobstructed access to the means of production. If they don't, it's slavery, period, as far as I'm concerned. But given the fact that I have such eclectic views, a lot of people can't really place me if I'm left or right or center or what the fuck. And that's why I just say I have my own movement. And I am trying desperately to give as much information as I can so that the resolution increases enough, the accuracy of imaging, rendering my movement, my ideas as possible. So I can't say that I'm on the left or the right or the center. I can't say that I'm an anarchist or a libertarian or whatever. I don't even claim capitalism or socialism. Most of my theory doesn't have anything to say about exclusivity of either of those systems. It includes both. I understand the merits of capitalism. I understand the merits of socialism. I find myself more deeply gravitated towards socialism than I do capitalism. I can't stand capitalism. I find it to be soulless and destructive and sick and inhumane. But I also recognize that many advancements, although indirect and unintentional, have occurred because of capitalism. But I don't feel satisfied with the way that things have been rendered so far, so I'm going to attempt this again. And this time, let me see if I can actually accurately represent my own position without attacking anyone else's or making any extravagant claims. So, my system, my movement, my beliefs are such that I use equality and, above all other measures, integration as my measure of what is true, what is good, and what is real. And I believe that those three components are necessary for any paradigm to touch the infinite, to do as I had said before with my paradigm being able, first one on this planet, being able to touch every other paradigm, every other thought, school of thought that one might have. Every perspective can be absorbed into an integrated, equal, whole, total system that includes every single other system. It is possible to build that because of set logic. If there is a set for every single thing, and paradigms are things, then there must be a set which includes all paradigms. I am trying to construct that system. I try to use that as my measure of justice, of truthfulness, veracity, and for efficacy. The ability to actually actualize and realize and manifest my views into reality, my intent into reality. And I think this is at least partially necessary for every person to develop a generalized methodology for manifesting their intent, which is what I would consider to be a paradigm, is what describes the methodology necessary to transform my innate subjective intent, because I always have one. I always have an intent subjectively, and transform that into a manifested actualization in the objective physical world. That's what a paradigm is to me. That's what this theory is supposed to do. And this theory is not like any other theory before it, because it tries to absorb every possible theory, not just the theories that we've already had on this planet, but any theory that could ever be should, in theory, be able to be integrated into a single set. And I want that set. I want that set because that's the set of all philosophy. That is philosophy itself. And I want it. Because if I have that, then I can tell everybody what they should be doing and not doing. And then I can consider my impact upon this world to have been just. Because justice would have to be in there somewhere. If this is a set of all the ways that you could ever look at the world, one of those ways must be just. If none of them are just, then we run back into nihilism. And like I said, I find nihilism to be the greatest of all philosophical views because it's the cleanest, purest, simplest, and most irrefutable, most integrated system that could ever be, except for mine. The reason being that nihilism excludes every philosophy, including itself. And by so doing, it demonstrates a very saudade-inducing fact, which is, again, that everything that I do is an arbitration. And in everything that I do, I have to oppose that nihilism, but yet steelman it, understand it, and really dance with it, grapple with it, get intimately close to nihilism in order to sustain myself despite it, and in maybe not even despite it, but in tandem with it, in conjunction with it, and in some kind of a paradoxical way, in direct opposition, diametric opposition to nihilism. Because nihilism, thankfully, is diametrically opposed to itself. And I find that, I'm sorry, admittedly beautiful. I think it's beautiful because it speaks of a beauty that is so pure that it cannot manifest. And I love that idea. I love that idea because it's so pure that it can't manifest. It's so beautiful, it cannot be seen. It's so complex that it can never be understood. It's so transcendent that it can never be refuted. There's a lot of things about nihilism that I think a lot of people either take for granted or find scary, or think that that's the end of the road. It isn't. It's the beginning. And when we understand nihilism, then we're free to begin our exploration of all the other viewpoints. Because it is the only one that I believe accurately represents the the real world as it actually is inside of philosophy, because philosophy itself is inept and cannot, as a relativistic two-reference system, encapsulate every other type of system. There is no way for a two-reference system to ever accurately depict a three-reference system, a four-reference system, a five-reference system, and so on. And because of that, nihilism, being a zero-referent system, is something that is always relevant and always applicable. It always has its impact, and it will always have its impact. Am I a nihilist? No. Thank God. I have found something that's even beyond that. So, the way that I look at my theory is actually as what Nietzsche always wanted, but I believe never found, or at least was never able to tell us about, was never able to transmit. It wasn't nihilism. It was the answer to nihilism, which I believe is the exact diametric opposition to nihilism, anti-nihilism. Anti-nihilism is what I believe in, but I don't consider it to be the greatest, because even it lies. It tells us that we can not only build this set of all sets, this set of all knowledge, but that set is somehow better than every other set, simply because it includes every other set. And nihilism is the only one that refutes that accurately and says, nope, that's just another arbitration. So when I say we're all equal under God, it is because, and again, I know this is going to ruffle some feathers, this is my own personal belief, archaeological, empirical data for posterity. I believe to the core of my being that God is everything and we are nothing. And that's why I feel like nihilism is the most accurate rendering that we could ever produce, because it's honest. It says, we as sinners, we as mortals, we as dumbass, ignorant chimps running around on this rock in the middle of space, we will never know what is real, what is true, or what is good. And everything that we come up with will and must always be wrong, because no matter what set we choose, that set does not and cannot include anything else that is beyond a set or is beneath a property. And considering the fact that nothing is nothing, then property must come from something else. So, considering the scope of relativity, a two-reference system, which is the limit of philosophy, is limited to assuming that there are such things as properties, which in fact they don't exist. Those are just accounting numbers for us to keep track of our comprehension of reality. It is not reality. It is our rendition of it. It is our simulation of it. That's why nihilism is the only true religion, the only true truth, the only true relative system that we could ever have is a system that refutes itself, because it tells you the actual truth, which is there is no two-reference system. That's an invention of my own head. There is no real two-reference system. Everything in reality blends together. There are no hard lines. All the hard lines that we can see are lines that we invented and imposed upon ourselves and each other, but they do not exist naturally. I'm sorry to say, because I'd like to see them naturally, because I'm a dumbass. And it would make it a lot easier for my dumbass to understand everything if it were simplified to a discrete level. But unfortunately, it is not discrete. It's fluid, it's indiscernible, it's fuzzy, it's wiggly, whatever you want to call it. And it transcends philosophy. It transcends any conception that we could ever come up with. So that means any conception that we can come up with about reality is less real than reality itself, and therefore is nothing in comparison to reality because it isn't real. It's just our image of it. It isn't it itself and can never be it itself. Only it can be it itself, and it is in and of itself isolated from me, and therefore I can never know or experience it in and of itself, because it in and of itself, whether it's reality, the truth, or whatever, is in and of itself. Therefore, it isn't accessible to me because necessarily it's isolated in and of itself. It is only capable of accessing its own parts itself. And that's why I say nihilism is the only way that we can render anything as philosophically accurate. Because it's the only philosophy that says philosophy itself is inaccurate. Philosophy itself is the problem that can never be solved. Relativity, this image, this two-referent system, is not reality. It's a weird, if it's even a part of reality, it's a small part. It's a very small part. And it certainly doesn't give us a view of what the whole reality is any more than the pimple on your face tells me anything about what your face looks like. So that's why I say nihilism is the greatest philosophy that has ever been or will ever be. And Nietzsche, unfortunately, I'm sorry, sir, legend among men, I am sorry, Nietzsche, but nihilism inevitably is the winner of the philosophical conquest. It is philosophy. Nihilism is philosophy, as rendered from reality's viewpoint of philosophy. In other words, if you were to take philosophy, because what philosophy does is it tries to create an image of reality that is identical to reality, which is impossible. It can't do that. It knows that. So, nihilism says, my image of reality, which is supposed to be as close to reality as to be identical with reality, is as nothing. Which is to say, reality is the only thing that is real, and therefore, any philosophy that I have about reality cannot itself be real. And that is the purest rendition that we could possibly come up with, is to refuse to render it in the first place.